Okay, once again, asante sana, dear moderator. A very good morning to you, friends of the media. Habari, or we say jambo. Thank you so much. As mentioned, my name is Mapolao Rosemary Mukwena. I am the director responsible for infrastructure at Sadc Secretariat. And here I'm told I should also mention the nationality. But can you guess? Can anyone guess where I come from? Just one. From? Hey, you're all wrong. And I'll not even read your news because I don't think I'll accept whatever you put on paper. Anyway, I'm from the Kingdom of Lesotho. Yes. I thought you'd you look at this and say yes. Thank you very much. I'm deeply honored and very happy to be here with you to share the programs that are under implementation in the infrastructure cluster. For your information, the Directorate of Infrastructure has 5 divisions. We have transport. We look at all modes of transport. We have energy, all modes or all sources of energy. ICT, including telecoms, transboundary water, and meteorology. So all in all, there are 5 sectors that we are covering. We seek to improve access by all to basic infrastructure facilities, thereby reducing poverty, maximizing the attainment of Millennium Development Goals, and today translating into Sustainable Development Goals, improving trade on a cost-effective platform, and optimizing regional competitiveness. You are all aware that the region has developed a regional blueprint on industrialization. And we all appreciate that without sound infrastructure, without quality infrastructure, your industrialization will but remain a dream if you don't pay much attention to infrastructure. In fact, one of the key constraints that would stop us from industrialization was identified as infrastructure. So infrastructure is at the heart of industrialization and therefore trade. We are also making efforts to make sure that private sector is very much active and participate in the regional infrastructure programs. All in all, the intervention areas or the key tenets that we are looking at include promotion and monitoring of the implementation of regional protocols, policies, and strategies on energy, transport and communication, and water that contribute to poverty alleviation. We're looking at development, promotion, and harmonization of energy, transport and communications and water policies, strategies, programs, and projects. We're looking at promotion of enabling environment for investment in infrastructure, and again, promotion of the development of physical and social infrastructures that contribute to poverty alleviation. We're also looking at coordination and promotion of integrated management of transboundary water, transport, communications, and energy resources for regional integration and development. We're further looking at promotion of capacity building and training programs to enhance regional integration. And the last one being promotion of stakeholder participation through, amongst other things, gender mainstreaming and increased private sector investment and input, as well as ease of implementation. So that's what defines the infrastructure program at Sadc. So, like I mentioned, we draw our mandate from a number of frameworks. To mention but a few, I've already mentioned the issue of the protocol, but of course, The protocol itself draws its mandate from the Sadc Treaty. I'm sure you're all aware of the Sadc Treaty. And that's the one which sets the tone in terms of the frameworks that we can develop in the region. We also have our own regional infrastructure development master plan, which we developed together with member states. It's member states program on infrastructure. We also developed what we call Sadc corridors development strategies. And as you know, whatever we do in the region, it's transboundary. It's also informed by the groupings that we have put together, and we call them transport corridors. Traditionally, yes, they were transport corridors because it was about transporting your imports and exports from the seas, from the ports, to the member states. And then, of course, we do have, in the area of water, borrowing from the Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, we also developed our own Regional Strategic Action Plan for Water Program. We have a number of these frameworks in the area of ICT, in the area of energy, in the area of meteorology. I won't mention all of them, but of course we have those ones which are very key, like your industrialization strategy and roadmap, your regional agricultural policies. You can grow your cassava, you can do whatever. If you want to trade with Zambia, if there's no transport, forget about it. So we are very much aware and alive to the fact that for us to facilitate movement of goods and passengers, we need to have sound infrastructure. Now, coming straight now to transport, indeed, like I mentioned, we are guided by the Regional Infrastructure Development Master Plan. We termed it what we call Moving Sadc to 2027. The Regional Infrastructure Development Master Plan, like I mentioned, it was developed and approved in August 2012 by the Sadc heads of state and government, and it's a vision up to 2027. So it has different chapters. One of them is transport. And what we are looking for in the area of transport in terms of infrastructure development, we're looking at infrastructure that will talk to integrity, that will talk to sustainability, that will talk to safety and security, and choice. You need to have a choice. If you are a Botswana and you want to take your exports out, you need to have a choice. Whether you're going through Trans-Kalahari Corridor, or you are looking at Ponta Techobanin in Mozambique, or you want to look further to Angola through Lobito. What is it that you need to put in place in terms of infrastructure and many other options? So you need to have that choice. And it has to be seamlessness. What we see today is that when you are pulling your trains from one country, when you get to the border, your drivers come out. Then the other ones come in. Why can't we run these trains all the way to where they are supposed to go? Why do we have to change the locomotives and so on and so forth? So this is what we are talking about: seamlessness. Seamlessness in terms of air transport. Now, when you come to Tanzania, you have to go through Ethiopia. You have to go through all over the world to come here. So these are the things we're talking about: capacity and connectivity. And of course, all these are underpinned by very strong policy, institutional and regulatory harmonization, and creation of enabling environment through legislation and capacity building. That's what we are doing in the area of transport. And I won't say much about this. I've already mentioned that in terms of development in the region, we have approved or adopted a corridor approach. I will share with you my briefing so that you can understand and appreciate these corridors. For those who are the locals here, you are aware of Mtwara Corridor in the Eastern Cluster corridors. You have your Mtwara Corridor, you have your Dar es Salaam Corridor, and many others. Your Walvis Bay and Dola Lubumbashi Corridor. For some of you who are coming from, I don't know whether they are all locals here, moderator, but for those who are in Botswana, you have your Trans-Kalahari Corridor and others. So this is a framework or a network that we have together as member states developed and approved. And whatever developments you are carrying out, being it on roads, being it on ICT, being it on whatever it is, it's based on this framework, a corridor approach. And this is where member states come together. In coming together, they enter into governance instruments. So for any corridor, for instance, Mtwara corridor or Dar es Salaam corridors, the member states who are in this corridor, they come together to sign a constitution or a memorandum of agreement or a charter or whatever it is, just to say we want to collaborate together. And then they will continue and say, we want to put structures in place. Your Dar es Salaam corridor, it has a secretariat based here in Dar es Salaam. So they will put a structure. Then they will also come up with an action plan to say, what is it that we want to look at? So they will say, okay, we want to improve whatever road it is, or the ports here, the Dar es Salaam port here, but it's all of them collectively saying these are our priority infrastructure projects in this particular corridor. And of course, they will contribute to make sure that the Secretariat is sustainable. So that is the modus operandi in as far as corridors are concerned. So we do have quite a number of these corridors with secretariats in place. Okay? Now, we are also looking at soft infrastructure in the area of transport. You might be aware of a program which is under implementation that is called a tripartite transport and transit facilitation. Tripartite meaning the three RECs, Sadc, the East African Community, and the Common Market for East and Southern Africa. So we've come together as the three RECs to form what we call a tripartite. So this program now supports all member states in the tripartite, 22 member states for that matter. In Sadc we are 16 and now we bring in these other ones. So this is how we are doing, and we are looking at issues that have to talk to vehicle load management, vehicle dimension and equipment and standards. You go out and you look at international traffic, you look at the standards and the quality of vehicles, buses, trucks, what have you. And this is a platform where we come together and say, what cross-border road transport rules and regulations do we come up with to make sure that we do have quality operations across our corridors? Abnormal loads. We see a lot of things, some of them very scary for abnormal loads. So we have to come up with regulations and standards in that regard. Dangerous goods, the tankers, we are coming up with regulations and standards. And very soon, I think in October, the tripartite sectoral committee of ministers of infrastructure will be looking at these model legislative provisions and some agreements for endorsement, which will later be considered by the summit of the tripartite for implementation in the tripartite region. So this is what we have been able to do in the area of transport. Railways program, yes, there isn't much, as you may be aware. We are very much biased toward road transport. Even the very same cargo that has to be transported by rail is transported by road transport. So we have developed a program which we call Railway Revitalization Program to ensure efficiency and sustainability. We are working with our regional organization, we call it Southern African Railway Association, which is based in Harare, Zimbabwe, to drive the railway agenda in the region. In aviation, of course, the main one is the open skies policy. Can we relax and make sure that we are all liberalized and we don't have to, coming to Africa, you don't have to go through Europe. Coming to Dar es Salaam, you don't have to connect like 3 times. Is it possible to do that? And it talks to regulations, it talks to operations. Can we pull together in terms of fuel? Can we pull together in terms of maintenance? Can we not look at Air Tanzania as Air Tanzania, but as a regional service? How do we then collaborate? So the programs under aviation and air transport program are looking at issues such as implementation of the famous Yamoussoukro decision, the open skies policy. Of course, the issues of safety. We now have a regional safety aviation oversight organization, which is hosted by the Kingdom of Eswatini in Babane. So we have that organization there, which is attempting to have a pool of inspectors to look at your issues that have to do with air worthiness. I was about to say road worthiness, air worthiness, and certification of these flying equipments and so on and so forth. So it is based in the Kingdom of Eswatini. If I may quickly go to ICT. ICT is also based on a number of pillars, and these pillars, and we dubbed our vision for ICT as Digital Sadc 2027. This is what you will get from the Infrastructure Master Plan. We're looking at a number of issues. The pillars include infrastructure, capacity building and content, e-service and applications, research, innovation, and industry development. And of course, underpinning all this is confidence and security of networks and services, policy and regulatory harmonization. We have made a lot of strides. I've shared in my presentation statistics in terms of mobile penetration, in terms of internet user penetration. You will see how we are faring as a region. We're not doing so good, but I will share my presentation with you. Now, the programs that we have been implementing or under implementation look at issues such as Sadc National Regional Internet Exchange Points. Why do we have to look west to America? Why do we have to look wherever to Europe? Why can't we have our own regional internet exchange points? Then the issue of Sadc shared satellite system, the issues of Sadc digital terrestrial television. I have also provided information in terms of how far are we in terms of migration to this DTT. Issue of Sadc roaming project. I hear in East Africa you are doing so well, but in Southern Africa we are still grappling with our roaming project, which is in 3 phases. We have been able to implement 1 and 2, but now the third phase is still under consideration, and consultants are hard at work. But I have shared the details in terms of where we are at. The issue of Sadc ICT Center of Excellences and model laws and strategies on cybersecurity, which is a concern for everybody, a cross-cutting issue which is very critical. I have shared with you in terms of where we are at. Now, coming to postal services. All of us, we are saying with the introduction of internet and what have you, post office is gone. No, it's not. It's not true. So the issues of e-commerce, how do you sell your cassava sitting somewhere in Bagamoyo, some small village there? How then do you use your post office to be able to sell your products? This is what we are doing or we are implementing under postal strategies and policies. So we have gone a long way. And we do have partners in terms of regional organizations. I have shared with them. I may not go through them. Now, in the area of energy, everybody is worried. Everybody is concerned. We have outages. We have blackouts. But we have projects which have been in papers for ages, but which are not moving. But let me start by saying, in terms of energy, which we dubbed Energizing Sadc, by 2027, we are looking at energy security, energy access, tapping energy resources, and sustainability. Of course, all these, they are underpinned by the enabling environment. Now, in terms of key intervention areas that we are implementing, we are looking at development of the regional power generation and transmission projects. We are looking at issues of oil and gas, issues that have to do with production, refineries, pipelines and storage capacity, and institutions in that regard. And promotion of renewable energy resources and energy efficiency sub-programs. You might be aware that we now have a new baby, one of our youngest subsidiary organization, the Southern African Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Center of Excellence. Now, in terms of other programs that we are looking at, it's domestication of the Southern African Power Pool Plan, which was approved by Ministers of Energy in 2017 to accelerate development of power generation and transmission projects and power trading. And one of the things that we are looking at in power trading, we have Southern African Power Pool, you also have your East African Power Pool. So we're trying to see how we can put the two together, and there's one critical project which is under consideration, which is the Zambia, Tanzania and Kenya interconnect. That one will see the two power pools coming together. And it might be interesting to note that even now West Africa, ECOWAS and others are trying to see how they can also connect to the two. Now you can see we will have now a continental transmission and generation network. So there are talks underway in that regard. And so maybe I can now proceed to water. And indeed, water, our concern or our main focus is on transboundary water programs and projects. And I'm emphasizing this because you have a number of dams which are sitting in countries, and we always find it difficult to regionalize this and say, why is it a regional issue? Why is Lesotho Highlands Water Project sitting in the mountains of Lesotho a regional issue? But this is where South Africa is getting its water from. Yeah? And we are coming up with another one. Botswana is also looking in the mountains of Lesotho to say, we want that water. So we are looking at those transboundary water resources. You have your Songwe between Malawi and Tanzania. There's both an element of energy, an element of water, and so on and so forth. But this is between the two countries. So those are the types of projects we are looking at. Batoka between Zambia and Zimbabwe, energy, water, and so on and so forth. So those are the transboundary projects that I'm talking about. Okay? But right now, having said that, because we are talking about industrialization, if we are going to develop regional value chains, totally, we are going to have those regional value chains, and we are looking at some place somewhere in the kingdom of Eswatini, and there's a dam there that has to be developed. That dam will have to be developed for our industrialization quest, isn't it? So the issue of regional, sometimes you may have to look at, in the rural areas, development of some infrastructure to address your industrialization agenda. Am I right? That is my brother, he's director responsible for industry development and trade. They are sitting there. So that is water for you, and the issues that we are looking at are water governance, infrastructure development, and water management. And in that regard, we do have a number of water resources, shared water courses, commissions that we have established in the region. For instance, you have your Nile. I want to see where Tanzania is, so that I can talk to. There's a Congo one, and there's a Zamcom one, the commission that we are talking about. And Tanzania is a member of the Zambezi Shared Water Courses Commission. So those are some of the issues that we are dealing with in the region. And indeed, in terms of hard infrastructure, we do have partners. Like we have a facility that we call the Sadc Water Fund with resources from KFW, where we are implementing water infrastructure projects. We also have what we call a climate resilient water infrastructure development facility, where we are looking at livelihoods projects in the rural areas where nobody is looking at, and we are promoting those. If I may continue, in the area of meteorology, we are looking at a number of things. And in terms of our vision, we call it timely, accurate weather and climate information by 2027. And we are looking at issues such as strengthening observation networks, improving data communications, improving technical capacities, increasing use of climate information, strengthening national meteorology services, strengthening regional climate institutions. I know right now I'm sitting on a request from from the United Republic of Tanzania to strengthen their own observatory networks on meteorology. So these are the things that we are looking at, and indeed we are blessed in the sense that we have resources now from African Development Bank, from EU to a tune of 8 million to bring the capacities in member states. The disasters that are happening today are saying to us, you need to do something about capacities in member states to predict and also disseminate information. Chairperson, the last part that I wanted to touch on is indeed the Regional Infrastructure Development Master Plan. Like I said, it was a vision up to 2027. We had a short-term action plan which started in 2012 to 2017, and now we are busy, hard at work, developing a successor program, 2019-2023, and of course the long-term 2023 to 2027. I won't go into details, but I've given you progress we have made because we have been able to establish our own project preparation and development facility, which is housed by the Development Bank of Southern Africa. I've given you progress in terms of what are the projects under preparation and what are the resources. But I think a good story to tell in this regard is that last month we had a meeting of ministers of finance with the recognition that the facility is currently financed by the donors, the partners. They made a very bold decision to say we want to put our own money. So they said from member states' contribution, the resources which are in the reserve fund, we are going to take some of those resources to capitalize the facility. That is good news as far as we are concerned, because we believe that this will leverage further funding from partners. Otherwise, right now, they are laughing at us to say they cannot even prepare projects from their own monies. So this is a good story that we want to talk about, that finally member states are saying enough is enough, we want to put our own money, whilst we are putting our house in order in the establishment of the Regional Development Fund, where right now only 9 member states have signed the agreement, but we need 11. And we need 11 not only to sign, but to ratify, so that we can have our own Regional Development Fund with our own monies, where member states are going to become shareholders. And they will, the reserve, the RDF will also have a window on infrastructure development. Chairperson, I will stop here because I know sometimes I do talk like a politician. I never want to stop, but I will wait for questions. I would want to make this very interactive. For questions that will come under the implementation of the Regional Infrastructure Master Plan, especially with the recent assessment that we have done, which was independent. I do have my colleagues here who carried out that independent assessment so that you can get it from them. They went to member states, they went to everybody, you get it from them, not from the Secretariat. They will be telling the story, not the Secretariat story. I thank you very much. Asante-san.
Thank you very much, Madame Mapalao, the Sadc Director of Infrastructure, for your very, very educative and very interesting presentation on how, you know, your secretary, your secretary and the Sadc in general have done to ensure that infrastructure in the region is improved for the success of the all state members. First of all, before we proceed in the question and answer session, I would like to acknowledge and welcome the Acting Director for Industrial Development and Trade, Mr. Colicious Tutalifi, who will be presenting the second paper in the second session, and has just joined us. You are welcome, please. My colleagues, as you have heard from the presenter, Madam Director here, who has talked a lot regarding what are the Sadc Secretariat have done to improve the infrastructure in the regions, in terms of transport, energy, meteorological, water, etc., etc. Has mentioned a number of frameworks that has been developed and they are currently carried out. And also has mentioned some corridors around the regions, including ours in Tanzania, like in Twara, Dar es Salaam, and the others like Transcam, I don't know whether, Transcaraham in Botswana. Thank you very much. And the others. Now these are some of the corridors that are now working. They are in operation right now. We have also, he has also mentioned about the member of states that they will sign, one of the strategies to sign MOU for the action plan, to collaborate together so that they have an action plan together implemented by both members. And also, he mentioned a lot about, other things like ICTs as one of the very core important thing in improving infrastructure, as well as energy, like energy security, transmission of energy, oil, power trading among the member states of the Sadc members, and a lot of things just to improve the infrastructure. Now I think it's a high time. Now you ask if there's question, and I believe you have some questions or an area that you need clarification. It's now your time. Or what should be the modality? Should we continue with the presentation, the second one, and then okay? I'm told that we now continue with the second presentation, and thereafter we just note down the questions for each presentation, and there will come for the question and answer later on after the second presentation. Please, it's my honor now to welcome Sir Kalishas for the second brief or presentation. Please.
Thank you, moderator. Apology for my rather sexy voice. My voice is always better, but looks like my sinus is under attack. I recognize, of course, the presence of my sister, fellow director, who has just presented, and my colleagues from the Public Relations Unit present here, and then of course yourselves, the media houses all present here. Then, ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned, my name is Kalishas as the first name, and my surname is Tutalife. I have a middle name. I will only mention it on condition that you will guess where I come from. Any guesses? I think that answer has to be investigated, moderator. We have to follow up. That's correct. I'm Namibian. So you can imagine we have, in a way, some connections to the United Republic of Tanzania in the history of our liberation. And it's always been a pleasure. This is my second visit to the United Republic, and I'm enjoying it. So apart from that, I just really want to share with you a few highlights from the Directorate of Industrial Development and Trade of the Sadc Secretariat. As already mentioned, I'm the acting director, so your questions should not be very strong because I'm not the original. Acting is always you're just filling up space, isn't it? So I'll appreciate if you are soft, but of course I will try my best to address all the questions that are posed to me. The mandate of the Directorate is really the coordination, if you like, of the implementation of the Sadc Industrialization Strategy and the Roadmap 2015-2063. I think in summary, that's why we exist, is to coordinate, not to implement necessarily, but to coordinate the implementation, because the Sadc Industrialization Strategy is made up of quite a number of issues, including what my fellow director and sister has just mentioned, which is infrastructure. And infrastructure, without infrastructure, you can't do trade. It's as simple as that. They are the ones who create avenues for goods and services to flow. Without IT, we may not send things to you. That's trade. And without water, or without roads, rail, air, not much can really happen in terms of regional integration. So I think you understand where that's coming from. And the strategy spreads quite a number of issues beyond even infrastructure or trade and so on. It includes all issues related to gender mainstreaming, youth involvement, and many other areas. So we are the coordinators of that strategy in terms of its implementation. We have quite a number of focus areas in the Directorate, and one of them, of course, is increased regional value chains and value addition for not only agriculture but also minerals and other products. You will appreciate, if you have seen the industrialization strategy, that there is special focus on three main areas, and which have been identified as the growth paths. The areas that have been identified, that these are the ones that are really going to ensure that there is increased economic growth and development in the region. And these are agro-processing, mineral beneficiation, and our participation in regional and global value chain. So those are the three main growth paths in the industrialization strategy. Pardon me. Our other focus area is on consolidation of the Sadc free trade area, which of course is the implementation of the Sadc protocol on trade. This is, of course, it just goes beyond your removal of tariffs, which may be very easy, but really to ensure also the removal of issues related to barriers to trade. You can remove tariffs, but if I stop you at the border because of some paperwork, that does not indicate there is a full stop or whatever. That's really just a technicality to prevent you from crossing, or tell you as a truck driver that you did not inflate your tires according to a certain level. There are many funny things that happen at borders. I think some of them you have seen, even as a traveler. I mean, you ask the question, what's the point of me being asked to fill in a paper, my passport number, while I'm holding the passport, I have to fill it in. And I have to, my date of birth, all these details are actually in the passport. So you start asking, why do we need that? So these are some of the challenges that we have in the region. It might be a necessity, but really it's kind of pain points, if you like. So just to mention, and also our focus on issues of standards and quality. This is really essential, because we don't want countries to be exchanging and trading in goods that do not meet the minimum standard or the specific standards. We shouldn't be selling rotten tomatoes to one another, or tomatoes that have not been tested and certified as good enough consumption. So it's important that we keep to a certain standards, and the harmonization of such standards is actually crucial. That's one of the focus areas of the Directorate. And of course, the the increased productivity of the private sector. And I think if you have been attending the Industrialization Week that just ended, we just witnessed the launch officially of the Sadc Business Council. The region recognizes that as much as at the political level there is strong commitment for regional integration and industrialization, the private sector are actually the drivers. But if the two parties are not working together through a public-private dialogue where they can come together and engage and agree on a certain minimum standards or priority areas, then we might actually be moving in two different directions. And therefore it's important that that engagement is there. That's one of our focus areas. Of course, then we have also a special focus on science, technology, and innovation. This has nothing to do, of course, with the fourth industrial revolution, as they call it. Not necessarily. It's part of, but that's not the focus. The key focus is to ensure that the region is able not only to access, but also adopt the right type of technology to actually improve our production, improve our productivity, improve the way we just do things. So that's one of our special focus areas. Let me now move to some of the key issues from the 2018-2019 period of implementation of the activities of the Directorate. Under the, did I fail to mention something? Let me just see, sorry for that. So I think you get the gist of what the Directorate is made of. It has 6 units, just to quickly mention that. It has the Industrialization and Competitiveness unit. It has the Value Chains unit, which in my usual role, that's what I hold. I'm the special for value chains. I'll go to that as soon as the director is appointed. And then industrial project preparation, that's important. Of course, you might ask, Director Mapulao just spoke about project preparation. That is more on infrastructure. This is more on investment or industrial project preparation. That's the difference. And then we have trade, of course, and trade includes, of course, issues of standard and quality. And then lastly, we have a unit responsible for science, technology, and innovation. And so the implementation of the milestones I'm about to share with you really focuses on those 6 areas. And on regional value chains, last year we were able to complete the profiling of 2 value chains, or value chain clusters, if you like. The first is on agro-processing, a regional profiling of the agro-processing, and the other one is on services. Under the agro-processing, what really came out was the fact that as a region, we might be saying that we are not trading because we are not producing value-added products. I think you have heard that statement many times, that the reason why the region is not trading is because we are all producing primary products or raw or commodities. The truth is we are also importing a significant amount of raw products from the rest of the world, which actually we do produce to some certain level, but we are not producing enough. And as a result, we are importing. There are huge gaps if you talk about rice, wheat, cotton, soya. In fact, in terms of soya, the last statistics I saw indicates that we have a deficit of 2 million metric tons in terms of soya. We are only producing 1 million. We consume about 3 million, and we are producing only 1 million. And so you ask, can the region actually make up the difference? That's the challenge, but it's an opportunity, actually, to actually produce that. So these are some of the issues that came out, and really the way forward is really see how do we then encourage, or what's a better word? It's not to encourage. How can we ensure that the region can actually make up that gap so that that money we spend importing these things is retained in the region to create employment, taxes, of course, for our public sector, and so forth and so on. So the benefits are really, really many in that regard. We have also embarked on the identification of investment projects in the region during the year. As we speak, of course, the team of experts that we had recruited had collected some few projects in the region, which we want to see whether this can really assist us in terms of regional integration. In other words, more of regional value chain development. Because a project in the United Republic of Tanzania might need certain inputs from Malawi, might need certain inputs from Zambia, might also need a market in Namibia and so on. And that becomes a regional initiative because it's not only solely focused on a single member state. So that becomes a regional value chain project. So this was the work of the expertise that we had recruited, and that work is coming to an end in this period or this operational year. Under industrialization and competitiveness, some key issues I can mention there was the completion of the protocol on trade and industry. The protocol on industry. Pardon, that's very different from the other. And as you recall, in 2015, the region approved the industrialization strategy. Now, as a strategy, it's not a binding document. If the United Republic of Tanzania does not want to implement certain things, you can't take them anyway and say you failed and whatever. It's just really talk. But once you have a protocol, because it's a binding legal instrument, if they fail to implement, that follows with, of course, they call it sanctions, I guess. But it's a terrible word, isn't it? But it will call for measures actually to require that state to oblige to their commitment. Okay? So we have that protocol. It has been completed. It was submitted this June to the Ministerial Task Force on Regional Integration, and the Ministers of Justice, Attorney Generals, as the right body to clear a legal instrument, just did that end of July and beginning of August. So that will be submitted then to the upcoming summit for signature. So we are very happy with that development. The other one I need to mention is, as you know, I said mineral beneficiation is a key area for us. We have just also completed or finalized the regional mining vision. I think you might have heard under the African Union Commission or the African Union that there's an African mining vision. Now, this is for process of domestication. We have a regional one that focuses on the region, which identifies the key minerals, the key areas, and the principle that will guide in terms of how do we maximize or optimize returns from the mining sector. There's always been talk, no, they just destroy environment, extract resources and sell and take all the money and so on. But we are saying, how can we really maximize from the natural resources that we have? And that mining vision was also endorsed by the Ministerial Task Force in June in Windhoek, and it was submitted it's going to be submitted to the Council of Ministers for their endorsement and approval, and thereafter implementation. Under trade, I think the focus was more on implementation of protocols, in particular the protocol on trade, focusing on the free trade area, but also the protocol on trade in services, which is not yet in force because it hasn't been signed by the required number of member states for it to enter in force. Now that we are 16 member states, might require more or less around 10, 11 member states to actually ratify it for it to enter into force. So the focus has always been on negotiations between the member states in terms of offers. What is it that they want to liberalize and offer to other member states and so forth and so on. So those negotiations have been completed more or less in the 6 priority areas that were earmarked. So that work is as good as done. Of course, there are still a few things that we need to attend to. And also you might have heard there's something called a trade-related facility, which is a program sponsored by the European Union to the tune of around 36 million euros, being spent by member states to try and really ensure that there is increased trade among themselves and also with the EU. attending to many issues, whether it's technical barriers to trade, is what do they call it? SPS issues. I always forget that word. Okay, so I think one thing I want to mention there is to say at least it was supposed to come to an end in September this year, but the EU has agreed to extend it by a further 2 years. So we are grateful for that. It's a key development because a lot of projects would have suffered had we not continued with the program. And let me, moderator, sorry I'm taking too long. I didn't know I was going to speak for this long. Quickly on, did I mix up my pages? Quickly on issues related to then on standard and quality, I think the focus was more on regional issues, particularly on harmonization of our standards, particularly in the onset of the continental free trade areas. How are we going to trade if our standards are not harmonized? So the region was really preparing together with other to really ensure that our standards are harmonized and meet the global standards. And then under science and technology, the focus was on the first one was, of course, a landmark development in the form of the Sadc Women in Science, Engineering and Technology organization called WISETO. This is really important because the gender mainstreaming is essential for the industrialization process, because otherwise we can't talk inclusiveness if women are actually not participating fully in the areas of industrialization. So that charter has been signed by 7 member states. We do hope that all operations should start as soon as all members have signed on. Then another key development in that area is this approval of the framework on centers of excellence and centers of specialization. Now, I think it's important to mention that if the United Republic of Tanzania is leading in a certain area in terms of science and technology, there's no need why Zambia should try to do the same exercise rather than the 2 member states actually cooperating, or even the whole region identifying that center in Tanzania to say we are going to actually work with that center and unlock the potential, so that we don't have mushrooming of centers, that we really coordinate. And that's really the essence of identifying centers of excellence and centers of specialization. Going forward, I will try to be quick. We are focusing on a number of issues. One, of course, project development is essential, as I mentioned, particularly in the area of agro-processing and mineral value chains. We are also going to be completing some studies related to pharmaceuticals and also what is very important, aquaculture value chains. We are also going to be this year focusing on the development of regional industrial clusters framework and guidelines, which is one of the key deliverables in the industrialization strategy and roadmap. Beyond the industrialization week that we have just held this year, we will be intensifying our efforts really in in our engagement with the private sector to make sure that we are on the same page and that we are able to drive industrialization together as a team. For trade, we will continue with engaging on the regional level and continental level, particularly in view of the ratification and the entering into force of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So our negotiations together with the tripartite includes COMESA, EAC, and Sadc. There's been negotiation in that regard. So we are going to continue with that work. Of course, under standards is really, again, at the regional level, the harmonization of standards is really important. We are going to be focusing on that. And lastly, of course, under science, again, I think it's mainly just the implementation of the protocol on science, science, technology, and innovation, STI. Right, so that's what we'll be continuing with. I wish to conclude then by just re-emphasizing the key observations at the recently held Sadc Industrialization Week. There's quite a number of them, but I think let me just mention a few. One is that we are endowed with natural resources. Let's make the best out of it. The other one is the fact that we are not trading enough. We have stagnated for the past 5 years or so. We have stagnated at around 20% in terms of intra-SADC trade. Why can't we push it to 50%? What is holding us back? Is it infrastructure? We really need to put efforts into that aspect. Of course, we have challenges in terms of project preparation, in terms of funding and so on, but infrastructure issues continue to hold us back. That's the reality we have. You can't move a bag of maize from Tanzania to Zambia. By the time you get to the border, the cost of transport will probably be higher than the value of your maize. These are issues. But maybe if it was rail, it would be cheaper. So we really need to intensify our efforts, and I think these are some of the observations that came out from the Industrialization Week. And then, of course, the newly launched SADC Business Council as a model, as a structure we need to work with as the public sector in the region, and of course coordinated by the SADC Secretariat. And lastly, we need, as a matter of really agency, start investing heavily in the area of research and development. Currently, we are investing less than 1%, and that's just not acceptable for our region if we really want to adopt the best technologies and adapt it. So I think altogether, this then really resonates with the message and call by His Excellency, Dr. John Pombe Magufuli, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, during his address at the official opening of the Industrialization Week, for increased efforts for all stakeholders to work towards regional integration in the SADC region. I thank you. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalisha Situtalife, the Acting Director for Industrial Development and Trade in SADC, for your very good presentation on how your directorate is working toward development of industrialization in the SADC area or SADC region. And he mentioned a number of issues that they have worked and that they are currently on the process. He mentioned about consolidation of trading among member states, including, removing these trade barriers. Because if we really want to push forward to achieve what we are aiming as a SADC region in the development of trade and the general industrial development, we should make sure that we don't have some unnecessary barriers for trade to grow among the region. So he mentioned about this, that there is a need to remove these barriers. Standard for qualities of goods that we produce and we trade among ourselves. I know each state has its own standards, but there is a need to harmonize these standards so that we have a common standard for all SADC member states. He also highlighted on the focuses that they have in the SADC, like science and technology, so as to improve productions. He also talked about the, Directorate itself. Directorate, it has 60 units, he mentioned. And he also talked about the team that they have formed, which is now about to complete its task, so that they can see how these countries or member states can really work together toward improving trade among themselves. He talked a number of issues. So once again, I would like to urge you, we give our presenters a big hand, both of them, please. Big hand to them. Now, before we proceed to the question and answer session, let me put clear one thing here, because you may ask yourself why from the very beginning of my introduction I said we'll just have two presentations or two briefs from the directors here, instead of three as mentioned in a program here. The third one was supposed to be a briefing by Director of the Organ and the Politics, Defense and Security Cooperation, Mr. George Kodos, but this one has been cancelled due to reason beyond our scope, so we'll not have this presentation. So these are the two presentations that we have so far, and we are through with them. Now, I believe you are noting down some questions that you would like to raise, or rather opinions, or whatever. Now this is a time. You just raise your hand, you mention your name, and to whom the question is, are you or is going to, or whom are you asking among these two presenters? Karibuni sana. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am. Kuna microphone, please, nisaidie ni microphone. Yes, please, microphone there.
My name is Martin Kayera from Kabazela newspaper. I have questions to both of them. First, to Madam, you talked something about how to improve power supply in the region. I want to know what is the demand and what is the supply currently, so that we drive the building new plants in order to satisfy the consumption of our industries. And the second, may I get clarification on the MOU which you talked, I think about developing the corridors. When is it going to be signed, and how the member states are going to fund it? And my last question to Mr. Tadife is about trade among member states. And the problem or the challenge we have in Africa in general, including SADC, is about the inflow of second or third-hand goods and services from abroad. So, what instrument do SADC have in order to protect the goods and services which will be produced in our region against those which are being imported from abroad? These are the two questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Arias Msuya from Wananchi Communications. My question is somehow similar to the former. It's about industrial development. Most of Tanzanian industrial owners are complaining of imported products from abroad while they are producing the same products. And I heard last week one of the owner told us that they have been requesting the government several times for expanding and rising the custom duty from the imported products, steel products, but somehow the government is staging. So you as Sadc Secretariat, what do you do to harmonize the situation, because most of the industrial owners are complaining of imported products? What's your take?
My name is Lucas Eliana from Shinwa News Agency. And my question is to my sister here. You have talked about data protection and the cybercrime. And it's known that cybercrime is now becoming a global threat. How is the situation regarding cybercrime within the Sadc region, and how are you addressing it?
You talked about liberalizing air transport, our sky, but we understand that the Masoko decisions, majority of member states, they're not implementing the Masoko decision because they are trying to protect the local airlines. How are you going to handle this situation that you're going to liberalize our sky, but at the same time, member states are trying to protect the local areas?
Thank you. My name is Joseph Kuka from Secretariat. My question, I just wanted to add on NH1 to say that when you respond to that, it would also good also just find out how many megawatts that you're looking to commission this year and next year, and also where that new power will come from. And then to use it, just to also just to confirm to say that the protocol on industry it will be signed at the 39th summit.
Wanachama wa Sadc wana maoni gani juu ya mradi mkubwa ambao sasa hivi Tanzania inatekeleza big hydropower, kwa sababu mara tutakapokamilika tutakuwa na uwezo wa kuuza katika baadhi ya nchi za Sadc. Sasa wao sasa hivi wana maoni gani, na labda wanaona Tanzania inapiga hatua kubwa kwenye mambo yake?
My name is Wangisa. I come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and East African Cooperation. My question is directed to the first presentation. As we know, Sadc is small and light countries, isolated and some island states. But I want to hear if there is about the corridors, if Sadc brings something to the island states as regards the corridors. And then on the issue of aviation, there is agreements being signed between countries, the BASA, between the two countries as regards aviation. Now I want to know if the Sadc Secretariat Directorate for Infrastructure has something to do with BASA. And then my third point is directed to the second presentation. There was something mentioned about if, for example, a country fails to implement a certain protocol. The presenter said we will require that country to oblige, but I'm still doubtful if there is a national interest in a particular country. How is the Sadc Directorate going to convince that country to oblige? Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we'll take this the final one, this presentation for round, and then we'll continue with more.
Thank you. My name is Sima from the Southern Africa Research and Documentation Center. infrastructure projects by member states. Can you give indication of to what tune and over what period?
Okay. Thank you. I think let's pause and get some reactions, answers from the presenters here. And if there will be some more questions, then we'll go other or second round. Please welcome. I don't know who is that, but you're welcome for reaction.
Let me start with the last one, the capitalization of PPDF, the project.
Capture you.
All right. PPDF, capitalization. The meeting just happened 2 weeks ago. Ministers of Finance. The same issue is now going to be considered tomorrow by Council. So you need to get the necessary approvals first. But I don't think there's going to be any challenge with that. Now, the how part of this is now going to happen. Once you have this approval, we now have to get down to work to now determine how are we accessing it. But the way it has been put is in such a way that they're saying they have now defined a threshold. You have your reserve fund, yeah? They are saying anything in excess of 50% of members' contribution in the reserve fund, yeah, will now go into PPDF. So we're still going to work around the modalities, the how part, and where are we now in terms of the reserves in the reserve fund. So there's still a process that has to be followed, and the modalities, because I cannot just go there as Director of Infrastructure and say I need 5 million tomorrow. So there has to be some frameworks to be put in place on how we are going to access those resources. But what I'm comfortable with, or what gives me comfort, is that there's approval. Now it's the how part. Okay, so I guess in the next 6 months, we should be able to say, yes, this is how much is now being transferred to PPDF. You need to have some agreements in place. Right now, to transfer money into DBSA, there are some channeling agreements. So there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done, which I believe that in the next 6 months, we should be able to do that. And even when we go to Ministers of Finance, at their next sitting, we should be able to say, this is what we are proposing now to be able to access. First of all, we needed approval. Okay? Now, island states, corridors. Yes, indeed. I talked about, I didn't give you a total number of the corridors that have been agreed on and approved for the Sadc region. They are around 18. Okay? But these are like Sadc mainland, but with island states, the program that we have is one which we call Maritime Corridor Strategy. We are yet to develop that with the assistance of the European Union, because they are saying we would very much like to also trade with mainland Sadc and the tripartite, and this issue is both in the Sadc regional agenda as well as tripartite framework. Development of a strategy for maritime corridors. Okay, so it's work in progress that I'm talking about. However, there's work on the security part also. Security, we are working together, and it's mostly driven by the organ, but you know it's cross-cutting. Now Let me start. Okay, now liberalization of the skies. You might be aware of a continental program that is called Single African Air Transport Market, SATAM. SATAM it was launched, I think, in January 2018, if I'm not mistaken, at the AU Assembly as a vehicle to fast-track the implementation of Yamoussoukro, which is over 20 years, that decision. And because there's no traction on the ground, then they came up with this idea to say, let's have this market. However, there's a solemn declaration that has to be entered into by the African, by the AU, by the African member states. In the Sadc region, I'll confirm later, I think we have around 5 of them who have already entered into this. And to enter into this, there are certain obligations. There are certain immediate steps or action plan which you have to implement, which you have to put in action. You have to inform everybody that your skies are open. We're talking about fifth freedom rights. You open up. So you have to tell everybody. It's one of them. Then others. You have to talk about your airline and so on. I can share all that information with you. But we are now fast-tracking the implementation of Yamoussoukro through SATAM. And the executing agency for SATAM is the African Civil Aviation Commission, which is based in Dakar, Senegal. It's the African Union arm on civil aviation matters, okay? And there's also a monitoring body which has been established. Right now, a number of legal texts have been agreed on, like competition regulations. We have them. We started as the tripartite, Sadc, Commerce, and EAC. We came up with ours, and those regulations were now elevated to the continent. Now we have continent-wide competition regulation because it's about competition. This is private business, eh? Yeah, so there's a lot that is happening. Consumer protection, we are working on those. However, there's an issue of conflict resolution. The minute you talk about competition regulation, you have to have a conflict resolution mechanism. And we are working at that at continental level. But we are, you remember, RECs are building blocks for the African Union. So we are working together. You are asking about BASAs, the bilateral air service agreements. So we realize that some of the bilateral air service agreements are outdated. Yeah? So we had to align the bilateral air service agreement with a broader Yamoussoukro decision. So most of them are being reviewed. Each time we meet at SADC level through the Civil Aviation Committee, and then Minister's Response for Transport, member states provide updates on how they are faring in terms of aligning the bilateral air service agreements with the continental framework on aviation services. So we are very much alive to the fact that they have to be updated. Most of them have done so already. You'll see in Zambia, for a long time now, they have introduced fifth freedom rights. Botswana, you fly from Namibia, you pick passengers in Gaborone, you go to Durban. You come back, you do the same. We did that. They brought in KQ, even though KQ, they had their own challenges. Now you have Ethiopian Airlines. They will come from Addis, drop in Victoria Falls, come to Gaborone, pick and go. So they have opened up. So slowly and surely, member states are warming up to the idea because most of them are becoming bankrupt. Okay, so that's what we are doing in the aviation in the aviation sector. I was asked about the issue of corridors, MOU. I'm talking about agreements which are already in place. Are you listening to you? I'm looking at you because you asked the question and I want you to listen. Okay, for Dar es Salaam, the agreement is already in place. And that's why you have a secretariat, because it's on the basis of that governing instrument that you are able to establish institutions. You are able to finance, because in the governance instrument, that's why you lay down the rules of the game. What will be the structure? What will be the mandate? How are we going to finance it? and so on and so forth. When we no longer talk to each other, we're no longer friends anymore, how do we get out of this instrument? All those are there. So for Dar es Salaam, for Trans-Kalahari Corridor, because there's a Secretariat in Windhoek, Namibia, the agreements are there. For Central Corridor, you have your famous Central Corridor Transit and Facilitation Agency. Your Northern Corridor, you have them. You have the institutions in place. And so the agreements are there. The agreements which are still under consideration, for instance, is for the Beira Development Corridor. Beira Development Corridor, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, now Malawi is coming on board, DRC is coming on board, and Zambia. So they have to enter, they have to sign the agreement, and they will put up the Secretariat. The North-South Corridor, spanning all the way from Durban, the port of Durban, all the way to Lubumbashi, DRC. It has around 7 member states. Some of them have signed the agreement already, others are yet to sign. So it's through negotiations. Okay, I'm just giving you examples of where agreements already exist. Okay, and then there was an issue on cybersecurity. Let me start with that one. Yes, indeed, this is a cross-cutting issue, and I wish my brother director Organ was here, because this is not just an infrastructure issue. This is not just an ICT issue. So when I talk to the issues of ICT program. But from the organ, now it's security-related matter, but there is a program under the organ, but I'll talk to the program in ICT. But having said that, I'm not saying, or I don't imply that there's no coordination. We are very much coordinated. So for Sadc, we have developed the enabling environment. The strategy is there from the ICT perspective in consultation with other sectors. We have the action plan, which was developed in 2018 on cybersecurity, but focusing directly now to programs, we are talking to what we call establishing emergency response teams. We call these SETs, and public key infrastructure. This is very critical. Who deals with this? When you receive threats, who deals with these issues? What happens? The what, the how, the why. This is the program that we are driving in the region. And in my brief, you will see where we are at in countries. Right now, Mauritius, I think they have expressed interest to house the agency, because there has to be a dedicated agency. But I will share, moderator, in terms of updates, where are we? Yeah? For instance, you have 4 member states, Mauritius, South Africa, United Republic of Tanzania, and Zambia have established computer incident response teams. But it will also explain what are these, what is the mandate. Yeah? And then Botswana and Kingdom of certainly have established IC sector sets, ICT specific, yeah. But others they are embracing even other key sectors. That starts with security, but it is it's a serious concern. But I'm sure when Director Cardoso presents, if he will also cover the issues of cybersecurity. Now I'll come to energy. We are all concerned, isn't it? And now I was asked the statistics, so I was quickly getting into my report, which is not, the picture it's giving me is not very good, because it's talking about the region being on deficit. Okay, coming to that. Just excuse me. These are 5 sectors. So I'll just read this, because we just had a meeting of ministers responsible for energy and water in May 2019, and this is the latest, the information that was presented to them. So I was asked, SARDC, don't ask me this thing, because I take you as part of Sadc. In 2019 and 2020, So the region had planned to commission around 5,000 megawatts and 4,000 megawatts by 2019 and 2020 respectively. So the statistics that was required. And the understanding was that these capacities will enable the region to balance the demand and maintain acceptable reserves in line with the global best practices. But going back, we are saying in 2015, a total capacity of around 2,000 megawatts was produced across the region, and 4,000 in 2016, and 3,600 in 2017, and 4,000 in 2018. Now, the installed and commissioned power generation in 2015 to 2018 did not reach the target that we had put for ourselves, both in the master plan and even in the pool plan. So we are saying as of May 2019, the member states connected to SAP. Remember, we have a vehicle in the energy sector. We have our own Southern African power pool. We still have 3 member states who are not yet connected, and therefore they cannot trade. So those who are interconnected to the SAP network had an installed generation capacity of around 64,000 megawatts and operating capacity of around 53,000 megawatts against a peak demand and reserve of 54,000 megawatts. So when considering the peak demand and generation capacity reserve margins, the region had a deficit of 571 megawatts. But I think because we are now in August, I think this picture, it has gone up. I think it's around 2,000 now, the deficit. And these you have seen in South Africa. They had serious issues. And Malawi and other Sadc member states. So this is the picture in terms of power supply and demand in the region. And then the other question was saying, how many new power... can I share with you in terms of the projects that are under consideration? Because I don't have a full list where these are indicative, because they are saying how many in which country are we going to get in up to 2022. So I will share that statistics because I think it's detailed and it's talking to each and every member state. Okay, that information is available and I'll share it with you. But the issue is the picture is not looking too good. And I think bottom line is financing, and coming up with this power purchase agreement. It's a big issue. So we have serious issues in this area, which is why we're trying to explore other mechanisms on financing of power-related infrastructure projects. There's a new concept that is coming, which is Regional Transmission Infrastructure Financing Facility, which we are negotiating as member states to come up with. And it will be a regional facility within the Regional Development Fund. We took this idea to Ministers of Finance. They have instructed us to go back and do some more work. But they are warming up to the idea. It's just that our motivation wasn't strong enough. But they are warming up to the idea. I think I have captured almost all the questions. There was a question on corridors which had to do with on funding. And I explained that when they negotiate these governing instruments, there's also an article or a section on financing. So they will say we will contribute, but for corridors, they're also looking at the issue of user pays principle. Yeah? Which is, if you look at the case of, classical case of Northern Corridor, there's a certain percentage which is charged for movement of trucks in that corridor. It may not be a lot of money, maybe 2 cents per whatever it is, but that is going towards improvements in the corridor. So there are a number of financing models that member states do look at when they set up these institutions. Chairperson, I'm not sure if there's any question I have left out.
Yeah, there's one question from this side. It was about Fiji hydropower. But in Tanzania, currently we have a very huge project which is Fiji hydropower.
And we are very proud of that.
Yeah, really.
Yes, we are very proud of that. It's one of the flagships not only in Sadc, but even with East Africa community or the tripartite. So we are aware of that, and it's a welcome, and we appreciate the leadership and the championing of the current president. It's one of those regional projects. And this is where the story is about the issues on energy. We need to take leadership. We need to champion these things because we need this infrastructure. So it's supported. It's one of those priorities in SADC, not only in SADC, and even in East African community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then let me welcome Mr. Malicious to reality on some questions that
Thank you, moderator. I actually thought we had an understanding with my colleagues from the media not to ask very difficult questions. That's very difficult to start with because I'm actually not from the trade area. I'm from the industrial area. So usually whoever holds this position, whether at ministry level, responsible for trade and the industry, you are either going to be on one side but not both. That's how we are spread, and I'm from the industry area. But let me try the best I can. I think just recognize that indeed the importation of second-hand goods, even cheap products from the rest of the world, is a key problem area for the region. I think to some extent it has contributed in perhaps the death of industries. So it's really a major concern. There are two issues, of course. One is a member's, as a sovereign state, the fact that they are allowed to adopt certain laws in the interest of, as long as, of course, those laws are not in conflict with their original commitments. But they are indeed a sovereign state and they may adopt such laws. But that's really not the focus. So I have to look at what instrument do we have as Secretariat. Both. I see that the question is perhaps focusing on, rather on more on infant industry protection sort of. The industries that we are trying to bring up. They are still very small, some of them. Of course, some of them have been here for 50 years, 60 years, but they have not grown. You ask what's the issue, there are many reasons for that. So when faced with such inflow of goods which may threaten industry, what is available to member states to protect themselves? The trade protocol is about trading within SADC. So it focuses, if you look under Article 21, it talks about infant industry. It's more on what goes within there. So if suppose Zambia is importing some goods which may actually be detrimental to the welfare of its industries, what then should Zambia do? If it's importing such goods from a fellow SADC member state, then Article 21 then applies to say they may apply actually for some form of protection or safeguard measures to say, look, we are going to suspend our commitments. In other words, if we agreed as a region that we are going to abolish tariffs on all goods originating from our region, of course that's subject to issues on rules of origin and so on. So suppose then they say this is detrimental to us, they can apply, of course, to the ministers who may consider such application, whether to give in to the request, say, by Zambia, to say instead of eliminating all tariffs, they are going to actually push them up maybe 15%, 30%, or whatever the case may be. They can then apply to the ministers who may consider that and say whether this is in line, or they can actually say no, we don't think we have done enough, for instance, to convince us to allow you to protect your industries. So this is usually what goes on. But for goods that originate outside of the region entering a member state, that's different. I mean, it's different for, even within SADC, you have the Southern African Customs Union, which is a customs union. The rules are different to the arrangement in Sadc. We don't have a customs union, we have a free trade area. It's a different issue. So how those goods are treated are subject to the laws that exist within that member states and the laws that exist within the region. So as a customs union, you have a uniform tariff on all goods that originate outside. So you may not necessarily have differentiated or treat others differently and so on. Of course, at a global level, we are bound by the World Trade Organization rules that govern on how we may treat goods that we think are dangerous to our own industries and so on. I don't think I'm doing enough to answer the question, but under the circumstances, I think it's just to say that for goods that enter certain member states, I think it really depends on the laws and rules that member state is bound to. I think that's what I can offer. But within the group, the protocol on trade then applies. Within the region, the protocol on trade applies. Outside of the region, that's a different issue. Yeah? Because the other parties are not party to that protocol. It's only state parties, if I may call them that way, that are bound by that protocol. So those rules are really more on those countries. In this case, the 16 member states that we have, particularly those that have either ratified or acceded to the protocol on trade. So I think just to answer the two questions that were posed in regard to that. Then the second one was on the issue of sanctions, what sanctions may apply. I've looked at the document that speaks on sanctions is, of course, the treaty. The Sadc treaty. I would encourage you when you go out. There's a stall for the Sadc Secretariat. I hope those books are still around. The Sadc treaty. You may pick one and look under Article 33. That's the one that speaks about sanctions on member states that may not actually be fulfilling their obligations. It's not specific, but this will be determined on case-by-case basis. So when member states are notified you are not fulfilling your, say, under trade-related issues, of course that will be considered first by the Ministers of Trade or the Committee of Ministers of Trade to say, member states so you are not fulfilling with your obligations. If that member state will say, okay, sorry for that, for lack of a better word, we are going to actually oblige. It was just an oversight and so on. They will oblige and nothing will happen. But if they persist, I think the word used in the treaty is that if they persist, having been notified but they persist, then that's when sanctions may be considered. And this is considered at the summit level because that's more treaty level issues actually treated. So that's the arrangement that is in Sadc. But they are not specific to say, now that you are not complying, we are going to do A, we are going to do A, but it depends on a case-by-case basis. I hope that somehow helps to clarify a few issues. Thank you. Have I answered all questions, moderator?
I think we have answered all the questions. There is otherwise that thinking. Well done. Thank you very much. Okay, do we still have more questions? Yes, then let's go around the final here. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Kumira Inambo from the Southern African Research and Documentation Center. The question is directed to you, sir. You mentioned that there are